of blockchain and UX experts, and I'm super excited to learn more about this topic, as I'm sure you all are as well. Before we begin, I wanted to start by telling you about the HCDE Alumni Leadership Board, who made this event happen. For starters, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Charlotte Akers, and I'm the Alumni Board President. The Alumni Leadership Board has a mission to foster an alumni and student community, build career connections, and provide industry skill sharing outside the academic curriculum. We are made up of a diverse set of alumni who have graduated from various HCDE programs, and we represent a variety of roles at a number of different companies. We are all passionate about bringing together our alumni to connect with one another, the students, the department, and with the larger UX community. The HCDE Alumni Leadership Board, or ALB as we affectionately call it, produces a medium art publication featuring articles written by alumni just like you. If you've already written an article or are interested in writing one, I encourage you to check out our publication and contact us for more information. We also try to create opportunities for mentorship and networking to build relationships, a sense of community, and professional development through alumni to alumni connections. Tonight's event is brought to you by the board's Continuing Education Committee and is the first in a series of lecture and panel discussions that will sponsor over the 2020 to 2021 academic year. Tonight's event is focused on blockchain, of course, a technology that I'm looking forward to learning about. A panel on blockchain is a terrific way to start off this year's continuing education series, as it fits with one of the two primary focus areas for our continuing ed efforts. Over the next year, you can expect to see events focus on either UX topics related to emerging technologies or topics on leadership in UX. Tonight, we'll start with an overview of blockchain, move into a guided panel discussion about UX and blockchain, and end the event with a Q&A from all of you in the audience. If you have any questions for our panelists, please type them into the Zoom chat window. We have a pair of board members, Mike and Nathan, helping to field your questions to our moderators. I think we're ready to get started, so let me start by introducing one of our two panel moderators for tonight, blockchain expert Arry Yu, who will get things rolling.
Thanks for having me. I usually see myself as more the figurehead. I'm surrounded by the blockchain experts on the Cascadia Blockchain Council. A couple of them who are with me, including John DeVadoss. So I think we'll learn a lot from these experts because they're really in it day in and day out and are really, really fresh with what's going on, especially currently because things do move really, really quickly. Let me share my presentation. 1 second. And my timer. So this is a presentation we often give to investors and policymakers. In 2019, when we went on a roadshow, meeting with all the investor groups in the Cascadia region, along with policymakers. And so this is what we found to be the most effective in educating those that may know something about blockchain, as probably a lot of you do and a lot of investors do, and some that don't know very much at all, like many policymakers were. So hopefully this helps kind of level the playing field in terms of like our understanding foundationally as we dive into this really interesting topic. But first, this is who represents our Cascadia Blockchain Council. It's made up of both small and large companies. And so what we try to do is maintain perspective in how we approach the marketplace and how we work to partner with various entities. And mostly we're really focused on public policy, community programs, marketing, really creating that awareness and education. Again, focused on investors and policymakers, but we're really, really interested in making sure that we create a accurate picture of what's really going on in this space, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And the narrative is usually, blockchain and Bitcoin is about people in hoodies doing evil money laundering, and that's definitely not the case, as you can see here. We're not wearing our hoodies, as you can see. So I'm going to go through this really, really quickly. But if you have any questions, definitely feel free to ping me. I'll give you my email address and contact information afterwards. And then we have our really expert panelists who are also available for questions too. So when we often talk about blockchain, people are like, oh, what is that? You know, it sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. It's very much like an escrow transaction. So if I'm in New York and you're over in Seattle and we want to do a transaction like buying a car or buy a house, there's usually a middle person, the escrow agent, who's the trusted middle person who's validating that, you know, one person really does have the money and one person really does have the asset, like a house, and it's, you know, really legit and they have the proper paperwork and everything's great. And in those scenarios, you need the trusted middle person, because I don't know you in New York and I don't know you in Seattle, or you don't know me in Seattle. And so there's that middleman. And that's where we started, right? So we started in this analog world where everything was physical. Remember, we used to have filing cabinets, for instance, and we used to write actual letters to people, right? So then when you fast forward to 2001, digital became a thing. Remember when, you know, ICQ and Friendster and Napster and, you know, MySpace came out, you know, intellectual property was all around these digital assets. The only unfortunate thing, though, is that digital assets are not unique, right? If I send Tamara an email, she gets an email, but I also have a copy in my sent folder, and all the infrastructure in between also has a copy of it. So like, which one is the real email copy? I don't know. It's a problem. Oh, I pushed next. All right. So then you fast forward to today, everything is digital. And by today, I mean 2009, right? So like 2009, 2010, 2011, you saw, you know, PayPal become a thing, Facebook became a thing, Twitter was born, all sorts of stuff. Like a lot of this became out there. And actually people started to use a lot more of the smartphones, if you remember those early days. And so everything became digital. And so that's where blockchain becomes even more important. So with blockchain, you actually have unique IDs for all the different assets that we're talking about. So when I send an email, the unique ID identifying which one is the actual real email, I guess in the like ad hoc example I'm giving you right now, we know which one is the real email. And blockchain works like a spreadsheet in the sky. So everyone can see what's happening, who's writing to it, who's accessing it, and it's a permanent public record that cannot be changed. So I talked quickly about why this became a problem that we had to solve, right? We went from an analog world to a fully digital world where we are today. Most of the processes and systems were designed taking from the analog use case and just digitizing it, but it wasn't really natively created for a fully digital world. And so that's why blockchain solves a lot of these problems. It solves the problems of counterfeits. It solves the problem of, you know, figuring out who is the trusted party and can I trust you? There you go. So cryptocurrencies is a thing that people often talk about when we talk about blockchains. And this is where the image of the guy in black hoodie doing evil money laundering comes to mind. But remember, not all blockchains have crypto, and not all cryptocurrencies are, you know, the full definition of blockchain. And Bitcoin is the blockchain cryptocurrency that most people think of, but there are lots and lots and lots of different cryptocurrencies. But again, this is a new kind of money asset system that was designed for a fully digitally native world. And there's a lot of great use cases that'll come about, and you'll see more and more adoption as a result. Supply chain, this is often talked about in one of the use cases that people really want to hear about. It's going to be one of the use cases that we dive into in our upcoming unconference on October 14th. But you'll see, you've heard probably of the sun-kissed, star-kissed tuna. They're tracking the tuna from all the way from the sea all the way to the can. You know, Walmart, I think, is using it for spinach, tracking spinach from the farm all the way to, Walmart where you buy it. And so there is a way to actually track these assets all the way through from like where you get it to like who's packaging it to like who's driving it to like where you're actually buying it. So this is a quick overview of all the different use cases that people have been looking at, working on, building. And so a lot of it is around data management, asset management, transactions, a lot of use cases where there are multiple people coordinating across many different, I guess, processes, like, when you're going to get a license for a new property in Bellevue. There's lots of people that are inputting into that process, so that would be like a good use case. In terms of market opportunity, I mean, people have been just putting a lot of money into it, obviously. And so when we talk about the value, and these numbers may have changed over the last year, right? So like $3.1 trillion of business value would be created by blockchain. And especially now in COVID times, people are really thinking about sustainability. And blockchain is one of the great technologies that can really help with that. If you look at the number of patents are growing year over year and country by country. And so this is still continuing to be a trend that'll continue to grow. Here's the, looking at investments growing over time. And this was sourced by PitchBook, a local company. VC investments continue to grow. And then I'm going to fast forward. We've seen a lot of companies get their series A, B, C, D recently, especially in the blockchain and crypto space. Some of the famous ones that I'd like to highlight is Lumetic was a acquisition that happened recently. And we have Chris Ingrao from Lumetic, who's the COO, who'll be on the panel with us. We've had Transparent Systems get a really big round of funding. We also, literally like a week ago, we had Nori get a $4 million Series A. And so it's continuing to grow even in the pandemic. I think especially in the pandemic. Let's see. Some quick names that I'd like to highlight in terms of startups in the Cascadia region that are working on blockchain or crypto. And I've highlighted those that are, getting funded, recently funded and or were acquired. And so these are good names to just be aware of as you navigate, potentially working in the crypto or blockchain space. Enterprise in blockchain, this is I think the enterprise capital of the world. And so there's a lot of enterprise companies that are exploring and have been exploring for many years the world of blockchain. A lot of them don't exactly talk about all of that they're doing because it's very still hush hush in the enterprise world, but there's a lot of good work being done. Oh, that's my timer. So as the council, we've been doing a lot of work working with policymakers. There's a lot of work going on across the globe. And so this isn't just a Cascadia thing. This isn't just a US thing. This is a global thing. And so one of the things to really think about as a user experience professional is that there's a lot of macroeconomics and policy and guidelines and standards that need to be discussed as we talk about the world of blockchain, and our panelists will, maybe give you insights on what they're thinking about. And that's it. If you get a chance and you want to explore blockchain, I would start with just exploring a simple transaction, like start with Bitcoin or whatever it is, and just see it work. And you can actually open up a ledger and see the transactions in a grid. And then join our distribution list, join lots of great newsletters and information out there. Information is plenty, so there's a lot of great resources out there. And then let's continue to share notes and trade, and that's it. Feel free to email me if you have any questions.
Thanks, Arry. This is Tamara, and I'll introduce myself in a second, but first I'm going to ask each of our esteemed panelists to introduce themselves and where you guys work and what you're working on. And what would you add to what Arry said about in her overview of blockchain? What's the most exciting thing from your perspective? And one other question I'll ask each of you is, how do you define user experience? What is user experience? So what is blockchain? What's exciting about it? What's user experience and what's exciting about it? So let's kick that off with Chris.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Chris Ingrao. I run strategy and operations for a company called Lumetic. We are a technology company that's owned by Providence, as Arry mentioned. Providence, if you're not familiar, one of the nation's largest healthcare systems based here in Renton. So Lumetic has developed a set of software products that are really designed around disintermediating information exchange within healthcare. And so we have two different sort of categories of products. So on the one side, we have a set of solutions around the business to business transactions. So things like claims processing that might exist between a payer and provider. And on the other side of things, we have a set of solutions around patient intermediated issues. So things like registration is a good example of this. So you are all familiar with this. When you go to the doctor, what do? You hand them two pieces of plastic. One is a driver's license, one is an insurance card. And what you don't see is all of the complexity that gets kicked off with manual processes and back-end systems and third parties. And it is really crazy, all the work that happens just to build a coverage record in an electronic health record system. And so all of that is expensive and it's really wasteful. And it's the kind of thing that adds up to these, if you read about them, the hundreds of billions of dollars a year in waste in the healthcare system. And so all of that money is going into administration rather than care. And so we're trying to solve that. And so on the patient-centric side, we are using a public identity blockchain. And so you might hear terms like self-sovereign identity, or I think Microsoft calls it self-owned identity. This is the kind of concept that is created by these public identity blockchains. And so the concept is that people will own and control their own information. And so in the future, what you'll see from software like ours and others is that people will carry around their personal information on their mobile device. With our solution, what you will do is you will carry around your personal health information on your mobile device, and you'll share it without having to use central authorities. And so the identity blockchain is what makes authenticity and the portability of trust available. And so these days we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how to make that easier to use. And in our case, we have users on the consumer side, on the mobile application, as well as on the business side, which is administrative users as well as clinical users. So what the other questions? Describe blockchain or something that gets me excited about blockchain?
Sure.
Is that the question? Well, first of all, I've been excited for the reality of some of these solutions for the last 3 or 4 years, and so it's pretty gratifying to be in the spot that I happen to be in, enabling this kind of technology to be deployed to an organization like Providence, where we are large enough that when we do it for Providence, we can now scale it to the rest of the broader U.S. healthcare community, and so. There are some very difficult problems that we're able to solve in a large, complex ecosystem like Providence, that we have firsthand access to the systems and the expertise to do it. So what am I most excited about blockchain? I'm excited about portable, verifiable credentials, which is this notion of taking around your information with you in your mobile device without the need for all these expensive back-end systems. I think that is going to totally transform things as people kind of get their heads wrapped around individuals controlling their own information and not be sort of a bystander when other people exchange our information on our behalf.
So you're at Providence, and I know that Providence is a huge organization and has big user experience teams. What's your thought about what does user experience do for you, or how is it part of your process or your work currently?
Yeah, so I guess I would separate the Providence user experience side from what we're doing, because I would say that our user experience team is pretty focused on everything involved in understanding the way that people would interact with our products and services, based upon their background, their interests, their motivation, how they got to the application, what their impression is about what we're asking them to do, what their pre-existing knowledge is around certain mechanisms. And when we're talking about things like personal health information, it's really sensitive to people. And so we are trying to make sure that we are giving them user experiences that are consistent with the way they use things, not asking them to do new and different things that they don't really understand, but that they are used to the trusted mechanisms so that they have confidence that the information is in fact secure.
So you do have a UX team?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
How big is it?
Oh man, great question. I think the entire design team is fewer than 10, but bear in mind, Lumedic is fewer than 60. So it's a fair size for, I think, the rest of the work that we have to do in terms of the product mix.
Very cool. Okay, thank you. Let's go on to our next giant brain in the room. We've got a bunch of them. John.
Thank you. I don't know if I can stand up to that tagline, but first of all, look, thanks guys for having me. Truly a privilege to be here, to be able to share and to discuss. So looking forward to the discussion. And by the way, Arry was very humble early on. I think she was into blockchain long before I was into blockchain. So kudos where kudos are due. She's a true expert. But like I said, very happy to be here. I'll share with you. I lead and the founder and I lead NGD Enterprise here based in Seattle. We build blockchain developer tools. And previously, many different incarnations. I built a JV with the NEO Foundation here in Seattle, built 2 startups, and then spent many years, probably too many years at Microsoft doing a variety of things. But at this point, blockchain is really what I do. I could start by maybe giving folks a view of how I think about blockchain, and then Tamara, you could maybe ask me follow-on questions. So for me, blockchain is very interesting in that it is both old and new. So what do I mean by that? Old and new. If you look at the history of computing and computers going back 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, right? In the beginning, it was about connecting data and processing. It was called data processing back in the 50s and 60s. And then, we had computers. Then we had, what was called networks of computers, being able to connect computers together. And then that led to obviously, WANs and MANs, and obviously in the 90s, the internet, which was the network of networks. So in the sense that blockchain is old, it is an evolution of connectivity, of being able to connect systems, entities, and so on. But it is very new. It's very new because unlike every previous computing platform, you look at mainframes, PCs, client server, the web, cloud, right? Every previous platform was a technical platform. It was a plumbing platform, meaning it let you build applications. Blockchain is very, very, very new in that for the first time in history, we have an economic platform. So what is an economic platform? Think about it. I was talking about Bitcoin and obviously, other scenarios. You could not build something like a Bitcoin on the platforms of 20 years ago. There had to be a fundamentally different set of infrastructure capabilities, i.e. the crypto economic protocols. So in that sense, blockchain is absolutely new and something we have not seen the likes of before, because it is the first economic platform in history. Now, I think what this means is in the coming decades, we're going to see different and maybe much more innovative waves of economic platforms. And this is only the beginning. And this is why I get very, very energized by what I do, because to me, this is the cusp, this is the beginning of so much more to come. And again, the key is, it is a platform, but it is an economic platform. And that's why things like trust and escrow and so on. All of these diverse scenarios we're able to address using this very unique platform stack.
Okay, so here's my question for you.
Sure.
You are an engineering guy making engineering tools for engineers on the blockchain. If I was to ask you what is the role of a user experience professional, what would you tell me?
Yeah, so first of all, look, I'm in the presence of many experts in the UX space, so I want to be very careful. It's not for me to define.
Oh no, but that's the whole point. That's the whole point. We'd love to hear what it is you have to say, because we have to be usable to you.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So the way I think about user experience, Tamara, is very simple. I think, look, if you're going to use something, the role of UX is to make the user not even think about what it is they're using, but rather to do what they want to do. If you're on the internet, I don't want somebody to think they're on the internet. They're messaging or they're talking or whatever, right? Likewise, on the blockchain, I think for me, success is when someone says, what the heck is a blockchain, when in fact they're using it. And that's how I define UX for me.
Very interesting. Okay. Yeah. And I think we can come back to that too. A question that we'll bring up later for everyone is sometimes users don't need to know about the blockchain at all. And sometimes people do, just like Chris just said, they have to trust that the system is trustworthy with all of their private information. So I think we'll loop back around to that because I think that's an interesting debate as well. But first, let's get our last panelist introduction. Matt, we would love to hear about you, what you've been working on, what you're excited about blockchain, and then I'll come back and ask, what is the role of UX in the work that you do?
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. And thanks for having me. So for everyone here, my name is Matt McKinney. I'm a VP at ArcBlock and also a former Husky alumni, and actually really happy to be part of the event tonight and having the chance actually to listen to both Chris and David share some of their expertise with the panel and actually being part of that. I was going to say, listening to the two of them talk, I would think that we actually all work together because I think you'll find that there's some very common themes in the things that we do. Really quickly, so ArcBlock, a little bit different than the previous two. So ArcBlock is really focused on blockchain application development. So we're an application platform based on the east side, and we're really focusing on enabling developers, businesses, users to create, deploy, and adopt decentralized technologies, if you will, like blockchain, like decentralized identity. From a platform perspective, we are blockchain agnostic, so our approach is a little bit different in being able to leverage all sorts of different technologies into these applications and services. And our goal is really to simplify the process of actually building these services and building these markets to give engineers and developers really the kind of, we kind of define it as Lego building blocks, right? Really giving them the building blocks they need to create whatever it is that they're trying to do, from a simple standpoint. I think actually just listening to both of my fellow panelists here, I'm pretty energized by what they're actually talking about. And I think there's again, kind of a common mission and a common theme. And at the end of the day, I think what's interesting about blockchain and to John's point, it's something old but something new. And I think one of the things that blockchain is, it's an enabler. It's a technology that allows us to transform things that we've gotten used to, or finding new ways to operate. And one of those, I think, of course, is decentralized identity, which is something that Chris had mentioned as well, and having that ability to gain control over our information. Not a lot of us actually think about the data that we spread across the internet and all of the data silos that we have as we kind of go through the internet, use our email. I always kind of ask people the question, what would happen if Google said, hey, you can't have your Gmail anymore, and they took away your email account, and all of a sudden you can't access your emails? Well, decentralized identity and some of these technologies we're working on are ways that to help avoid those types of situations. So it's a pretty exciting time, and I think the part for me that is actually really energizing is we're really just at the forefront of kind of the adoption of the technologies that we're creating. So it's very early and a very exciting time to be in it.
And tell us what you think. What's the job of a user experience professional in blockchain?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's I think John hit on a little bit as well. The idea for me, when it really comes down to it, I really kind of take it down to a very simple level. And a UX person, the role that they have in, for example, ArcBlock is really building successful outcomes. Those successful outcomes come in many different flavors, many different shapes. It could be a user story about how to successfully deliver a button, how to create a workflow, how to create a process, but really looking at those outcomes, because many of the things that we are making are brand new. There are new ways to interact with these systems, the data that we create. So it's something where having a UX person is a key component of those anything that we build. For example, because finding that successful outcome is key, because if it's not well created and well designed, who's going to use it, right? They'll just go back to using what they were using before.
Excellent. Okay, we're going to get on, and we're already starting to get some questions, which are great. I'm going to introduce myself, and I'm going to give my little overview of user-centered design, although it's just going to be much shorter. My name is Tamara Adlin, and I am a degree holder from the Human-Centered Design and Engineering department in 1996, before it was called HCDE, and I got my master's degree there. And I've been in the world of startup and tech and startups and larger companies that want to behave more like startups ever since then. And I got dragged into the world of blockchain kicking and screaming by a dear friend of mine. And I am now finding myself with the title of Chief Product Officer for a blockchain venture capital company. That's the name of it, blockchain. My perspective on this, what I would say is that yes, user experience and user-centered design is all about, can your users or your customers happily do the things that make your business thrive? There's a business component because we all have to make money. There's, can they do it, and will they happily do the things that make your business thrive? And I think that some of in my experience with blockchain companies is the piece that we haven't communicated well enough, or we haven't adjusted it well enough, is that the work that we do usually takes time. And the past 20 years of the field of user-centered design has been trying to describe the return on investment of what we do, which takes time, the return on investment in user research, in doing iterative design and testing, bringing users in to actually see a prototype, not trusting our own impressions of what the best process is, and also being master translators of technical stuff into stuff that makes sense to regular human beings. Over the years, I think that user experience has gained sort of in popularity and mainstreamness in the technical world. And certainly we've faced new frontiers of new technologies over and over and over again in those years. But there is a shift now, and I think that's a really interesting point in this conversation, which is blockchain is enormous. Blockchain is intimidating. I wrote a little intro article on that for UXers. I think a lot of the terms that we even heard in some of these intros are probably confusing to some people listening, and that's okay. It takes a little while to learn it. And there's a desire to go so fast that in many cases, it doesn't feel like there's time for UX in the way that this audience has been trained to deliver the fruits of their labors. So that's the context I wanted to put around it. And maybe that is one of the questions, is everybody in blockchain is in a huge rush, right now. So if I'm this person who's sitting here saying, it takes time, you got to give us time, give us a little time, wait a minute, we have all this value and ROI and blah, blah, blah. You guys don't have any time for that. So I want you to respond to that and tell me your thoughts on it. What do you have time for? Where is that balance? And how can we understand your world in a little bit better so we can adjust what we're delivering to you?
Was it somebody you were asking the question, Tamara, or can we just go?
Go for it.
Okay. So, look, first of all, I think it's a wonderful question. I think you're right. There is clearly a perception that, it's a lot of plumbing stuff, protocols, chains, transactions, and that's what makes it, such a messy business to understand, to comprehend. And also, I think partly, as Arry was referring earlier, crypto and crypto wallets and such, have not been designed really for the common man or the common woman in the street, right? But to your question, for me, the way I see it is, yes, I mean, the guys who are building the protocol can go as fast as they want, But perhaps the way to think about this is, what are the scenarios? Because I think from an UX perspective, we care about the business scenarios, right? And those things, by and large, are not changing, by the day or even by the hour, right? So I would say, as long as we focus on the business scenarios and let the plumbers work on the transactions and protocols, and they can ship 6 times a day, but the end user obviously still has needs that have to be met. And to me, that's where the rubber meets the road.
Okay, so to continue on from that, let me come back to Chris. The people doing the plumbing, that is making sure that you can carry your mobile phone around and it has the right amount of information that was carried around on plastic cards in your pockets. Users don't have to worry about how that's being done, but they do have to worry about whatever technology is on their phone. Is that really as safe as carrying this card around in my pocket that no one can see? If they're being told, like one of the questions came in, they're being told that everything's public. What do you mean that this maintains my privacy? So how much do we have to explain to users while keeping the rest of it hidden?
Yeah, I think it is a terrific question. I think that I guess there's 2 things. The first question that you asked around how do we balance the speed? I think I just want to quickly answer that in that I absolutely identify as an individual who's super impatient. And so maybe that's everybody and it's not unique to me. But having a group of people tell me that we have to go do user research for the next 6 months and we'll come back and give you some, magical, insightful output isn't going to work so well. So what I like is the framework by which we do some level of rapid, I'd say rapid feedback, in that there's a set of assumptions. We should challenge every assumption. There's a set of assumptions that we might determine are good assumptions, valid assumptions, and therefore we should turn around that user research into some level of insights to enable the teams to keep working in parallel while we go and dig into some of these other areas where we have proven them invalid. Because I think and I don't know that this is possible or not, but the challenge is, what people like me don't like is that somebody goes off, does a bunch of work for some period of time and delivers an output that confirms 90% of the original assumptions. That's not going to make people feel like the juice was worth the squeeze. So there has to be a little bit of, I think, a way of a thinking model or a framework whereby we split those so that teams are enabled to move forward quickly while we go and wrestle with the tougher things. So I guess I wanted to first answer that. And now, unfortunately, I've forgotten your second question.
The second question is about how much do they have to understand about the plumbing in order to trust the easy to use interface?
Oh, man, I feel like nothing or very little. I mean, the truth for me around how much people on the user experience side have to understand blockchain, I would say is not much. There's some abstractions there in my view that I want people to understand the enabler. I mean, Matt said this earlier, it's an enabling set of technologies. Enabling what? It enables a differentiated value. So what are the things that the technology allows us to do that is different than every other scenario to solve the same problem or to solve a new problem? And so that's the level that I think people have to understand. As a business owner, I'm trying to bring something to market that is different than the competitors. And so that's what I would want people to understand, the enablers and what differentiated value do they enable, and then get their heads wrapped around, okay, now how do I use that to provide value to people?
Okay, thank you. Matt, I want to give you a chance to chime in on these things.
Yeah, well said. I think both of them, both John and Chris made some really good points. I think the challenge we have is the industry as a whole is of course accelerating and moving at warp speed. I think anybody who's in the industry can see that there's this kind of real-time evolution that's happening. What I kind of go back to and refer people back to, as far as speed goes, well, cloud, for people who've been around, cloud was the same. It was the same experience where, cloud came to creation and all of a sudden it was moving at warp speed, right? Everybody wanted cloud for this, for that. And I think blockchain is actually going through something similar. Where people are going to be successful are, in fact, what Chris said, the people who can actually find that value and take these technologies and enable people to do things that actually deliver real benefit to them as they interact with these new type of scenarios, if you will. So I think companies like ours, companies like Neo, we are building the plumbing. We're building these kind of frameworks and technologies that make these things work on the back end. But at the end of the day, I tell people like, I would even talk about blockchain if I didn't have to in a lot of cases, because blockchain is the enabler. It's not the key part. It's just it's a piece of the cake, as you kind of go through it. And so, the conversation we usually have is more about the scenario, more about the business opportunity. What problem are they trying to solve? And can blockchain or decentralized technologies that we have solve that problem better than how they can do it today? And I think that's where companies begin to see real value in that. And that's not going away. I mean, those things will stay because they have longevity, right? They have a purpose, they have value to the business. From the technology side, things will, of course, continue to accelerate and transform because with good UX, with good product, these things are evolving, right? We're actually getting better at what we do with each iteration as we go through this.
There's an irony here. You go, oh, sorry, Arry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask a question unless you want to.
I just wanted to toss one thing in and then I'll shut up. There's a huge irony here to me because I think actually UX people are being told you have to know a lot about blockchain to help. And you guys are saying users don't have to know anything about blockchain to use it. And I don't think the industry has sorted that out yet. And I also think that blockchain people like to tell themselves that users don't need to know anything about how it works because regular users don't need to know a lot about cloud. But regular users aren't being asked to put their money and their finances and their identity and their trust and their safety in the cloud in the same way that blockchain is. So I think that maybe 80% of blockchain is like rewiring the house and you still flip the light switch, but those use cases where it's not like that are really going to be tough.
Yeah, Tamara, if I can just add one thing, and actually I was having this conversation yesterday. It's a very I think what you said is very pertinent to this because with the UX people, for example, at ArcBlock, I mean, one of the conversations we have is common sense, right? Think about whether this actually makes sense, right, in terms of the process or from a user standpoint, because we can have a wild imagination about how these technologies can work, all sorts of things that we can do, but at the end of the day, all the people we're interacting with are not us, right? They're people who are going about their business, doing whatever they want to do. They're not going to want to go through the trouble of going through 20 steps to do something. Or, if you've ever used a crypto wallet, you have to set up these kind of crazy passwords that are 12 words long, and you're just like, okay, I'll never remember that. I'll bury it in my email somewhere, and hopefully I can find it in the future, as an example. And I think for example, with Lumetic, I mean, the stuff they're doing is key because they're taking these core technologies and making it very usable and very focused on the user side, right? Which I think is key to success as we do that. So yeah, I think it's common sense is a key part, for me.
I think, Tamara, one of the things that you're getting at might be this notion around public blockchains and the immutability of it, and people feeling like their information stored on a blockchain will be accessible by anyone and it'll be always available. And in the industry, we have this set of language that we use that's not super helpful, of things like what's on chain, what's off chain. So there's absolutely some work to be done there to answer that question so that people understand where their information is going. In our case, we don't talk about blockchain at all. What we talk about is your information in our platform only exists in 3 places. It exists in the source system of the information. So in our case, that might be in Providence in their Epic EMR system, on your mobile device itself that you control and carry, and with whatever downstream organization that you chose to share your information with explicitly and nowhere else. So there isn't, any other central database. Lumetic isn't storing your information. And so rather than try to unpack all of the details around the blockchain aspect, we instead try to tell them where their data is and is not, and hope that that does a good job. But it's that for sure is a problem.
So let's turn the questioning around a little bit. From your perspectives, Matt, John, and Chris, where are the biggest challenges in user experience that you see in the world of crypto and blockchain?
You want me? I can jump in. I would say one of the areas where we see I think kind of continued troubles, if you will. I wouldn't say troubles isn't the right word, but challenges is specifically around user tasks. So user tasks where we require the user to do something, and it may be something they're familiar with or maybe not. But things like verifiable credentials, identity, these things they do require users to take certain actions in order to do that. And so what we see, for example, is we spend a lot of time on our mobile wallet or applications that we're providing to the users to try to really solve these problems. But once you get outside of the ecosystem, right, then they run into these ongoing challenges or issues. I think secondly, a big part of that also around the UX side is kind of the data portability aspect of it, because not all these systems talk to each other. So each user is going to have a very different user experience based on the different type of system that they're using. And again, people are trying to solve it, but it's something where it does exist today.
So if I could jump in, I think that's a very good question, Arry. I would say from my perspective, very candidly, I think we have a terminology problem or a lingo problem, right, in terms of how we talk about concepts, ideas, and features. For example, if I were to Venmo to Chris, $50, I don't have to know that somewhere along the way there is a fixed protocol and a Swift protocol and interbanking connectivity and all this stuff, right? But unfortunately, in the blockchain space, I think we're kind of making it almost mandatory to have to understand the consensus and sort of the interchain and all this. This is, I think, a fundamental challenge we have that hopefully, as the UX community, you can really step up to help us address.
We love that stuff.
Yeah, I agree with both of those comments. I think in our world, as it breaks down a little bit, when we start to talk about blockchain solutions that have to do with currency or monetization exchange, there's an order of magnitude jump in terms of some of the complexity associated with that maybe some of the rest of us don't have to deal with. But otherwise, I'm wholly unqualified to answer your question, Arry.
Okay, thank you.
Arry, I think one of the interesting topics I will say is user experience design from a word standpoint or content standpoint is also a key component to the user experience. So to the point that the guys just made, it's thinking about the words that we use and how we present them, from a user experience standpoint, is also really important, because the words actually have meaning, right? And people will come into it with kind of their own stereotypes or kind of preconceived ideas of what these words mean or how they should work. And of course, like in the industry, right, we of course make our own terminology, and I think that's that's a challenge, and it's definitely something I would put to the user experience community as well, is that it's not just about design, it's actually about words, right? It's actually about how we present things, both verbally or through design, as we do that. And I think that's another key component for me, is really kind of getting granular on that user experience standpoint.
Actually, that's true. Like the word blockchain, depending on who you're talking to, they assume different things. Like, do you mean the Bitcoin blockchain, or are you talking about Hyperledger? Are all blockchains private, immutable, and decentralized? No, not really. Yeah. So it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Right, and you just made most of our audience members' head explode, Arry, just by saying those words, immutable and blockchain chains and like multiple chains, and what the hell do you mean there's multiple chains? So I think there really is. Listen, we're used to facing new technologies. I've faced a million new technologies over time, and yes, in the very beginning, there is a love affair with the technical aspects of them. And there is a love affair with how it's all so different and how it's all so new, and it's going to change everything. The difference with blockchain is it really is going to change a lot of things, whether we like it or not. And it's going to change a lot of stuff that no one thinks needs to be changed except you guys. right? So me saying that money doesn't necessarily need to be redesigned, Arry was like, yes, it does. And I'm like, okay, okay. So we're trying to figure out, I think one of the things I've been trying to figure out is if we've been doing this a long time and we've proven the value of slowing down to speed up, and slowing down to speed up doesn't work for you guys at all, how can we let you know? How can we be heard? How can we tell you things in a way when we're just trying to help that will help and won't result in, I mean, listen, when things go right with blockchain, it's wonderful. When things go wrong, it's catastrophic for a lot of people. Like if it's money, if it's identity, like if it goes wrong, if you lose, if the person who knows how to get into that wallet is dead and there's $2 billion in that wallet, it's gone. That kind of terrifying aspect of stuff is the stuff that we worry about, because an edge case isn't an edge case if you're the one who's experiencing it. So I guess I'm asking you, if we're feeling like Chicken Little, how can we tell you the sky might fall if you're not careful?
So can I jump in here? That's a very good question, Tamara. Absolutely. So there's something I share with people in teams, companies, customers, clients, partners, which is tell me something I don't know. And that's what I would share back as a challenge, right? Anytime, and Chris made the point about value and adding value. I think it's a very, very critical point, which is at every interaction, every point in time, the key, and not just for UX, but I think broadly for all disciplines, is tell me something I don't know, and do it in a timely fashion. And that's how you build credibility and trust and the ability to then to say, guys, slow down, because there is something you haven't thought about, right? And that's kind of the one thing I'd push back very strongly is keep that mantra in your mind as you work with developers, IT people, security, business types, and so on.
Yeah, and we are a newer discipline, but I think we already have gotten lazy in some ways. I think this has been a shock to the system, certainly for me personally, about holy shit, no, we have to find new ways to tell you something you haven't heard before, or something that's important in a way that you heard is important.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I think John said it right, and I think one of the things that we try to do, and I can actually, I mean, we have kind of personal experiences in dealing with these things. I, for one, have had plenty of frustrations with blockchain. I'm kind of like preaching to the choir, right? It's something where I know myself, I've had the same potential problems, concerns, worries as we do these things. And one of the examples I would point out is very early on, we built an application, a mobile application for our users, right? And we kind of went through these scenarios. We said, hey, we've thought of everything. We've created a great user experience. We've done our homework. We put it out, and probably within 48 hours, we had found out, oh my goodness, like we need to redesign this whole thing, because what we thought was right, and actually what we had heard from everyone, we had built, right? But based on the feedback that came in, I mean, it was almost instantaneous where we say, okay, there's certain parts where we're going to have to redo it, because what we thought we heard was in fact something different, right? Once people start really interacting with it and really using it, we had to transform it. We had to rebuild it and start over and create an even better user experience, right? And I think that, communication's key, right? And there are certain things where, from the crypto side versus kind of the technology side, it's a different conversation, because from a crypto side, there are expectations, with banks and credit unions, and there's certain safeguards that they built in. From a crypto industry and a blockchain industry, I mean, some of those things, they're just not there yet, right? And it's something where I think the industry has to develop and be able to hear that feedback as you do that. And so that's just that's a big topic I think we probably could have a whole event on at some point in the future.
The first method that was the most powerful for us was to get the people in charge of building the product to actually watch a user, even just one user, use it. And I think coming back to that, always the way to show you something you don't already know is to show you a regular human being trying to remember their Signal password.
That's funny. Well, and I think one of the things I would add on that, recently I had some opportunities to work, and we've been doing some work in Africa and partner with companies doing digital assets and tokens and these things. One of the really interesting things that came up was an accessibility issue where, again, a lot of presumptions that we made kind of going into the scenario, and what we quickly found out is most people can't read. And this geography where we were going into and delivering an application, and the guy just came back and said, well, you have to rebuild the application because there's a lot of words, and unfortunately, people don't, it's not a big thing that they have around here. And so we had to really kind of rethink how that whole experience would work. And I think that's, again, another scenario where you put something out there and you make some presumptions about what's going to work, but the reality is it's something much different. And I think that's where companies who are in this business have to be flexible and nimble and be able to respond to that, especially from a user experience standpoint.
I think there's a lot to be discovered over the next 1 to 10 years on how the world evolves starting from now, with the monetary policies and fiscal policies. Do we continue on the globalism track, or do we become nationalists and face inwards? What's going to happen with the presidential election? But at least a year ago, I would say when building, you kind of have to think global first. And you also have to think about the lowest denominator of person. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but the most simple user, might be the person that can't read, might be a person that really isn't as sophisticated as the typical, Airbnb app user or, HSBC, app user. Most of the world doesn't have access to banking like we do here in the United States. And so having more of that global perspective is really important. I think when working internally with your corporate colleagues, for instance, or vendors or consultants that you're working with, having a very business outcome and user outcome sort of language in why you're asking about something or why you're questioning or pushing back on timelines is also really important. And ultimately, I think also taking the stance that we're all on the same team. We all have different perspectives and disciplines and backgrounds, and we all have different faces. But if we're on a team together, and maybe the team that we want to think of more often than not is that we're on the team of humanity. All of us are people. All of us are sisters, daughters, parents, uncles, whatever it is. We have friends. We're all doing this because we want to make better lives for our future communities, our legacy, our family and friends. And so I think also thinking about it in that perspective as we talk internally to our colleagues or, look at jobs or whatever it is, I think that's also going to be more and more important because it really is this humanity network effect is what we're building for. We want to have seamless experiences. I should be able to send messages and money to my family in Germany and Japan and Korea without, having to think about, is it Monday and are we during, US banking, US hours, no, right? I don't know if that answered your question, but I babbled in and jumped in on that question.
It's not babbling. So we've hit 7. We've got a team of people behind us who are managing the scenes. Do we want to pop over to the Q&A section of tonight's agenda? People from our audience?
So there's a question from Chris Daly. It would be great to hear the panel talk about the layered access to the encrypted information within the blockchains and what it means for how people interact with data like medical records, mortgages, public records more broadly. Thanks. Who wants to take that?
I'm going to lean on John for that one. I think that's a bit further down in the plumbing than I can answer.
John.
All right, so I've been nominated. Yes, thank you. But then talking of Signal passwords, just recently, in fact, I did lose my Signal password, and it gave me a tremendous amount of pain. I'm still dealing with it. On this one, so maybe it would be good to get a little bit more context, but what I can understand from the question, I would say is there is a perception that somehow because of the so-called public ledger, everything is out in the open in the wild. That's not true at all. What is certainly public is the log, the transaction log. For example, there was a question earlier about voting. So you could verify, did John DeVadoss vote once or 5 times? Because obviously in the transaction log, you could see it. On the other hand, my data, what I have belongs to me, and I get to decide who, when, for how long, etc., is able to access my data. So I think when the person was asking about layered permissioning, the ability, it's not all or nothing. You have the ability to design multiple levels, hierarchies in terms of authentication and authorization is something that makes it very powerful. So you can go all the way from, obviously, we talked about Bitcoin, right? I mean, the true public chain, if you will, to permission ledgers like, Amazon's QLDB, which is the other end of the spectrum, and then being able to design, obviously, along the way to suit your business needs. And of course, whatever your users require and demand is how I am able to understand and respond to that question.
And another question from Carol is that when we were talking about how user experience and doing it thoughtfully takes time, and there's a little bit of a friction between how fast the business wants to move, I think was when she asked this. So can't those longer term customer research projects uncover new use cases for blockchain tech that is not obvious? And those deep insights that you don't know yet take time to uncover, and there really is no shortcut.
Absolutely. I mean, look, there is a price to pay, right? I mean, nothing, if it's worth something, it takes time. There's no magic. There is no overnight success story, unlike what the media would like us to believe. So yes, I think on the dev side, certainly people like myself, my colleagues do fully understand. But again, I would echo something I said earlier. I think the key is for me to add value to you as the UX person, for you to add value to me when I'm wearing the hat of the engineer. Is again, my key question is tell me something I don't know, challenge me. And that's what's going to make me stop as a developer and say, hang on a second, maybe I do not understand this. And before I mess it up too badly, I better understand what the user needs are and what are the business use cases, if you will.
When I've said something like that, tried to tell people, and I've dealt with extremely early stage startups, with members of those teams who have never launched anything because their most recent experience was a fret. And there's a lot of teams that are like that in blockchain, and that's okay. People like you guys on this team who have a lot more experience are actually fewer and far between. But there are times that I've said something like, here's something you don't know. And the response has been, you, Tamara, don't understand the technology, and therefore you're wrong. Even though I'm talking to them about something about a human experience. And I sort of just get silenced by that. And I'm bringing that up because I am a hard person to silence. And I'm sort of speaking on behalf of a lot of the other people who I think are listening, where it really is hard to push back against that. So let me ask you this way. How much does a UX person have to know about the technology to get in? What's the lower limit? Just tell us and we'll do it.
I think this is a good question for John. John, you and I had a conversation about who makes the best talent brought into the blockchain companies you've run. And I have a similar also response to it too.
Do you want to go first, Arry, and then I can follow up?
Yeah, I think especially in the gold rush that was 2017, 2018, you did see a lot of young people who hadn't built products before or built companies before coming into this space. And there was a lot of opportunity and a lot of money put into those companies. I think you've seen a maturing of the space, especially over the last 2 years, so 2019 and 2020. You can see like a lot of the gray hairs from just the, several of us here speaking today. So it's grown up really quickly, and technology is evolving exponentially. The space is evolving exponentially. But in terms of the best hires, I think a lot of the best hires that I've worked with in the space didn't graduate college, are brand new. have some basic tools, but are able to learn really, really quickly and apply them, and are just really can do, just get shit done kind of people. Some of the best blockchain engineers that I worked with previously, also like fresh out of college, had taken, a couple of years of engineering courses, and off they went in building some of the really amazing results for our companies. And so I don't know, that's been my experience so far. But obviously, I'm also hired often as the Wendy and for the Lost Boys, or to help a lot of the young entrepreneurs with some of my gray hairs. So it's the typical best practices for startups that have been tried and true over the last 10 plus plus years still ring true. And when you're building a company, it's blockchain or crypto or AI or machine learning, the same best practices still apply. John?
Yeah, so I completely concur, Arry, absolutely, and we've discussed this earlier as well. Just quickly to go back to Tamara's question of, I think you said, how much of the technology do I have to know, or do I have to understand? And I'll give you a very maybe politically incorrect answer, right? I mean, the lady who's working on the consensus protocol is always going to know more than the guy who's working on the persona design, right? And so trying to figure out how, the UX guy is going to tell the protocol gal, look, this is wrong, it's not going to fly. But I think the key is, it's, the rubber meets the road for me on the scenarios, the business scenarios, the expectations, right? The constraints, the enablers, and the customer journey. The one thing that the developer does not really know is the customer journey. And I expect the UX designer, the expert, to know the customer journey really, really well. And so I would have the debate at that level, at that stage, rather than somewhere else.
Totally fair.
I completely agree with that comment. You guys heard me earlier say this. I don't think the technology is super important. I think the implication of the technology is super important. I think getting your heads wrapped around the paradigm change that's available is what's important, because what you'll be able to do with that is then understand how that impacts human beings and how human beings react to that kind of change. That's what needs to come back. And so do I think that the designers have to get their heads wrapped around that? Absolutely, because you can see it happen when you're explaining, the moment somebody gets it, it's like a brain virus where they like everything then becomes, oh, I can blockchain this. And so you can see the awakening happen. None of that has to do with the low level technology. It has to do with the implications. So I totally agree with John. That's where I would land on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I agree with you guys. I think the one thing I did want to mention too is from a user story standpoint, one of the scenarios where I think having a very solid user experience background versus expertise in the technology is, sometimes what happens is, as you're working with these new technologies or these new capabilities, there is a bit of a breakdown, right? And having that background in process, knowing how to create a user story, or knowing how to go into the user experience design, and being able to kind of parse it back and look at it, from a process standpoint, to try to figure out the resolution, right? It's no different than if I write a document, right? There's a certain format that I'll use, a certain process that I'll use, but the words I'm using are actually different, right? And I kind of liken user experience to something similar, right? Where when things break down, it's good to have that background and be able to tap into that. And that's, I know for me personally, has been a benefit in the past as well.
Cool. We have more questions that came in. Let's see. Greg says, I was accidentally sent $300 on Venmo once. I had a real moral dilemma returning that money, as I was broke at the time, but I returned it. Oh, good job, Greg. What if I wasn't an honest person? What kind of measures do you take to help keep this from happening?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier, right? That there's still there is still some work being done on the governance, compliance, you know, kind of framework that's being built in, especially on the crypto side or the monetary and fiscal side. You see that, of course, and you know, there's kind of the up and coming decentralized finance, for example, which is a big up and coming kind of push in the blockchain industry. So I think some of those things are still being developed, right? And the challenge that you have is that Arry had mentioned that some of the work that the Cascadia Blockchain Council is doing from the government perspective is that until you have certain entities or organizations become part of the process, it's very difficult to build that framework or build that kind of security net, if you will, especially on the financial side, where you know you're just relying on the companies who are kind of moving at warp speed and building all these products to say, hey, like we're gonna build all these extra services, right, to make sure somebody can send money back or contact somebody. The reality is, right, things aren't really going in that direction, and part of that has to do with, I think, from a government standpoint, is there kind of is a lack of I don't know, Arry, what would you say, a lack of support for these type of technologies at this point, which makes it very difficult to do?
True, but if I could just jump in again, and kudos to the person, I think, who gave the money back. But I would challenge you. Look, I mean, if I sent a check to somebody in the mail, snail mail, and I had the wrong person's name on it and they received it, I mean, it's entirely up to them as to what they do or might not, right? Or if I ever find out, I might call the bank. I think it's not right or fair to put a higher level of expectation with respect to crypto yet, right? It's not, there is no silver bullet that we could do that somehow makes, you know, the previous mental models go away. And also equally, you could argue perhaps it's not right to have a crypto system that could undo transactions like that because they could be misused, right? For reasons that we might not like. So I would want to just challenge back and say it's not as black and white as, look, I made a mistake, give it back to me. You know, who knows, tomorrow the IRS might say, look, I made a mistake, I want to take it from you.
Yeah, definitely. You know, John, I would agree with that, and I think that's an important difference. And I think the point I was just trying to make is that I think from a governance standpoint or from a developing technology standpoint, some of these things are just not in place yet, right? And yes, I mean, I would agree that, you know, it's not difficult to send the money back, right? I have the user address of who to send it to and those kinds of things. But I think from a security standpoint, it's something where, you know, these things are being added and being developed kind of over time, and there still is a maybe a lack of awareness or lack of ability, right, to be able to really build it from a larger standpoint where some of these things may or may not be added. Because again, this comes back to the regular user, right, the people who are not in the industry, and they just don't know, right, they don't understand these things, and it's something where, you know, who's going to be out there to protect those people, right? If I send you money and, you know, what happens, right? Is there any recourse for that? And, you know, these are all things I think that are being developed still within the marketplace.
So I want to jump in with Nellie. Nellie's question. Which is, I think, related to this in an interesting way. Is it strange for me to feel more safe knowing that an authorized central agency is controlling and managing my data? What if something was to go wrong with the blockchain? Who is to blame for, and who will take this responsibility? Before you guys answer, I want to connect the dots a little bit. The kind of conversation you were having about it not being black and white, whether or not that money should be given back, is the kind of conversation that's happening in the blockchain echo chamber. It's deep, it's philosophical, it's way more complicated than anybody on the outside really gets yet, but it's part of your vernacular. It's what you live in. The rest of us would say, if I got sent a check that didn't have my name on it in the mail, I couldn't cash it because I don't have an ID with that name on it. And you guys are like, well, it's the same thing. And who don't, you know. So let's bring it back to Nellie's question. When you're getting questions like, is it strange for me to feel more safe knowing that an authorized central agency is controlling and managing my data? What if something goes wrong with the blockchain? How do we handle the simplicity of some of these questions with the complexity of this opportunity and the kinds of new challenges that we are facing? Arry.
Well, that's where we have this biggest problem is around words and terminology. I mean, there are lots of different kinds of blockchain. What if something goes wrong with the blockchain? You know, if you're working with an application or a particular company and they're using blockchain, very likely it's going to be a private blockchain, one that is centralized, not decentralized, likely. And so that company or that application would be the one to take responsibility. So like there are lots of different kinds of blockchains and lots of different scenarios. And so, yeah, that was what I was going.
Maybe I'll take a quick poke at it. I hope this will be helpful. So I think it's a great question. I think we are used to this notion of central governance authorities. And we sort of have a single throat to choke, right? So in this particular case, if it's MasterCard is a network operator of their network, and if something happens, we have some confidence in MasterCard that they have a governance structure in place to make good on wherever the mistake was. In these new models where we have decentralized governance, this is, I think, a really important new pattern. And so rather than having a network operator, you're going to start to see a new role emerge that I call it a community manager. And what it is that it's an organization that oversees the community around the governance authority. And so there are movements in this direction. There's an organization out there called the Trust Over IP Foundation. That's a Linux Foundation effort. There's, I don't know, 150 plus organizations that have joined it, like MasterCard, IBM, et cetera. We happen to be a steering member there, so I'm in full disclosure. But that organization is established specifically to create governance structures for this new pattern of decentralized efforts, so that we have an answer for you on when this happens, what is your recourse? And so all the business rules and all of the same kinds of work that MasterCard has created for their central authority is being ported in a way into how we manage it in a decentralized community. And what you'll see is these ecosystems develop where a set of groups, organizations are coming together to publish these governance frameworks, and you can trust them, and then you also might have trust anchors like the MasterCards, Amazon, Microsoft, whoever you normally trust. That's part of that might give you some comfort. So maybe that's helping.
Isn't that interesting that our solution for that is to come back to humans?
What I think, to come back to Chris's comment, I mean, I take a little bit of a different approach to it. And the reason being, I happen to be one of those people who trusted my information to various companies, one of those being Equifax, for example, who I think most of us know got hacked at some point. And of course, you know, there's all sorts of shenanigans that have gone on since then. And I won't really go into that. I kind of want to tie it back to the previous question. And one of the things from an identity standpoint that solves some of these problems or solves some of these questions is, and Chris, you had mentioned at the beginning, is there's this kind of advent of this new thing called verifiable credentials. So something that you can actually do. So when I send a so-called token, or we'll call it a digital asset, if you will, I can actually package it up in a way to where it's actually attached to a so-called verifiable credential that requires a certain thing to happen if I have this transfer take place, for example. So there are things that you're beginning to be able to do that even if you sent money, for example, or there's certain safety kind of requirements that you can build into these verifiable credentials where certain things have to be met, or you know, that information can't be taken unless certain thresholds happen. And I think that's kind of another key component to this that's going on from a decentralized identity standpoint. And this is something where verifiable credentials are very much kind of moving outside of the centralized model, right? This is something, you know, so-called trustless interactions, right? Where Arry and I, for example, we don't need to know each other. We don't know anything about each other, but we're able to interact with each other using this digital asset and verifiable credentials, right? And so I think that's another interesting thing that's happening in the industry is verifiable credentials. And I know, for example, you know, speaking back to Microsoft, for example, it's a big focus, you know, for companies like them who really see the benefit and the power of these verifiable credentials as we move forward.
Just to, if I could, you know, I think you have some very good responses from Chris and Matt and Arry. If I could add one thing, you know, as a human being, you know, I make mistakes. People, we make mistakes. Accidents happen. And that's why we have something called insurance. And so I want us to just be cautious and not think about necessarily technological responses, right? Or even people, because the way a Visa or a MasterCard sometimes is able to compensate is because of things like insurance. So those models are being reinvented in this world of blockchain and crypto. So I would certainly not want to discount, you know, those good patterns we've learned over centuries.
So that's why it's really important that we have private and public partnerships and, people working on bodies of standards and guidance and all this governance stuff. We're still very, very early in this place. We have more questions. So let's power through them. On the topic of governance, we had a question come in from Marlo. Are any regions further along in governance innovation, RE, regarding blockchain? For example, EU has GDPR for personal data and advertising. Is Europe further along in governance discussions, or can governance only really be discussed at global levels?
I would look to Canada right now to lead a bunch of this stuff, actually. They're with what BC Gov is doing. That would be my first model.
So if I could jump in, I would say governance, I think, applies both in the small and the large, right? So governance in terms of even, design decisions, trade-offs for consensus, and all the way up to obviously, things like data privacy protection, PII, and so on. With respect to geographies, I'm not as familiar with respect to which regions are ahead or behind, but I do concur there will be a need for certainly a global effort to address this, as Arry said, with respect to standards. Otherwise, we're going to end up with walled gardens everywhere, which will be a huge step back.
And there are different corporate structures being created too. So all the lawyers of different legal law firms are trying to figure out, is the C Corp and S Corp and LLC and LLP, the typical corporate structures, the only way you can have corporate governance? There's going to be different ways of doing that. There's community governance. There's governance tokens where you can buy in and let them be able to vote for how things happen within a community. So this is all very new, but again, we still have to talk and figure it out.
And I want to throw in there something. When Arry and I first met, we were talking about, Arry is all about the governance and policies and all of that stuff. And she really opened my eyes to the need for people in the user experience community come in and help articulate those things as well, and help to define some of those things as well. So if any of you UXers who are listening to this are interested in taxonomies and information architecture and the technical communication side of what we do, this is an interesting place where you could get a foothold, and you could certainly get a rapid fire education.
Yes. Very, very good, Tamara. Good point. More questions. So from Chris, what does user research look like in blockchain tech right now? Tamara talked about the slow pace of UX research. Is there a way to test prototypes and early developmental models of these blockchain technologies? Or is it mostly testing? Is the testing being done once the product is fully built?
Well, Matt gave us an example of that.
True.
I was going to say, I think it's actually a combination of both, because some of these things, in order to test it, we're creating something brand new, right? And you're building a product that really doesn't exist. And yes, you would say, sure, we need to do some user research at the beginning of that product, but there's nothing really to test because it doesn't exist, right? And I think that's that's where I come back to my earlier comment about leaning on process and leaning on kind of previous experiences and expertise, right, to be able to carve those things out. And I think, one of the most interesting kind of user research surveys that I did is more focused on words. We did some user research around the topic of decentralized identity, and specifically around the words decentralized identity, and what do you see or what do you hear when you see that? And more than 90% of the users came back, never even saw the word decentralized, right? All they saw was the word identity, which was really interesting, right? Because you say, well, hey, we're going down this path of building decentralized identity related products and services, but yet we have this challenge that people just don't understand it, right? So as you build these products, there is some intuition, right? There is some, I was going to say some, Arry mentioned earlier about the people who are just coming out of college, right? Where you don't have any preconceived ideas of what should be done, right? You just go and you build it. And I think that the early part of the blockchain industry, definitely there was some of that. And I think that's transitioning now more to a traditional kind of development cycles, if you will.
Oh yeah, because that's something I always bitch about. I always bitch about the fact that it was 2017, 2018 mostly when this was happening to me. I act like a victim because I felt like one, where I felt like every blockchain company was not only trying to invent what it was trying to invent, it was trying to reinvent the software design and development process, because anything old was suspect. So Matt, you just said that, I mean, what I heard, what I wanted to hear from you, maybe the word decentralized was in front of it and I didn't even notice, was that there may be a return to, hey, you know, maybe there were some lessons learned in this design and development process for getting a product right that are worth revisiting.
Yeah, and well, I think I come back and again to all the user experience folks, here in this, it's a critical part of everything that we do, and I think, bringing up the questions, identifying the holes, it's a very important part to play. I would also say just as an asterisk point to this, don't be afraid to engage with engineers and developers, right? At times there is a different workflow, there is a different process. Having those conversations can be difficult because we don't always see eye to eye. For example, I'm more of a product and a marketer, right? And talking to engineers can be challenging at times, right? So it is something where you don't be afraid to speak up and voice that opinion, or voice something again that doesn't make sense from a user experience standpoint, because it is important to verbalize that and bring that out to the forefront.
Thank you, Matt. We have very limited time and 3 questions so far. So I'll read one question and then pick someone for an answer, or someone volunteer very quickly. All right, so Chris, as a US researcher myself, who also teaches economics classes on blockchain and crypto, any advice on how to get into the world of research on blockchain? Research. John.
Oh, in terms of research, I would say the best place to get into is just 2 areas. One is obviously GitHub, just get in, poke around, play with it, get a sense of who's doing what and what's working. The other one is the Discord community. It's a place where you can listen, hang around, just watch and hear what's happening.
Cool. Anonymous says, FYI, I have little or no knowledge outside of your talk today about blockchain. I'm curious if you know how people can commit fraud, i.e. identity theft, with the usage of blockchain. Is it even possible? Because historically, wherever there is a secure system, there will always be people looking to break it. Whoa. John or Matt?
I don't think I'm an expert on identity theft, but look, it's a fact. It happens. I mean, that's just a fact. And of course, there are ways to mitigate, and there are ways that people are innovating on both sides to break the system and to fix the system.
Yeah, I was going to say we do everything possible, right, to avoid those situations. And I think while decentralized identity, for example, is a huge leap forward in terms of some of the encryption technologies we're using and the things that we're doing, they're any kind of digital system, right? It's not perfect, never will be. And the one I hear about, for example, is what about quantum computing? What's going to happen to blockchain when that happens? So it is something that you have to be mindful and be cognizant of these things and be aware that it could happen, right? And that comes back to the company and the corporate structure and how you handle those.
One more quick question I'm going to squeeze in. Lucas says, what trends do you think will help bridge the chasm for technology adoption? Non-fungible tokens in games, parametric insurance for agricultural workers, digital identity. Matt, go.
Yeah, sure. I can jump in. I was going to say, I think, NFTs, gaming, tokens, DeFi, for example, decentralized finance is huge right now. And I think a lot of us, I know in the industry, for example, we've heard a lot about, sushi and Uniswap and these things that are happening. The more those things happen, I think what's important about that is it's getting people to use it and interact with it and experience it. Because I think with decentralized identity, blockchain, applications, DApps, all these things, the biggest parts that missing is just getting users, getting people to try it, to experience it. And whether it's NFTs, whether it's gaming, whether it's crypto, I'm all for it because I want people to experience what's possible and to be able to partake in that.
Okay, so we're going to hand it over to Charla to close out. I just want all of you in the audience today, first of all, thank you. And I also want you to know that we need you. Everybody in the blockchain community needs you, welcomes you. And even if it's going to take a little while to get up to speed, it's worth it because this technology is fascinating. It's scary. It's terrifying. It's huge. It's small. It's everything. And it's also a great challenge for us as UXers to revisit how we describe the value of what we do and how we bring something they didn't know to the table.
Awesome. Thank you all. This was just an incredibly fascinating conversation tonight. Really just want to say thank you to our fantastic panelists and moderators for sharing their time and expertise with us. A huge shout out to our continuing ed committee for putting this event together. We also want to say thank you to Lisa for providing a transcription of this event. And finally, I just want to thank all of our participants who showed up and asked some incredibly interesting questions for all of our panelists tonight. We will be sending out a follow-up survey to this event and would love your feedback. If you're interested in connecting with the Alumni Leadership Board to learn more about future events or get involved, be sure to fill out your survey. We're currently planning another event around accessibility for the late fall, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.